Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Spent my Wednesday night, like I think a lot of us spend our Wednesday nights during the off season, and that is looking at different college football programs and trying to determine what teams have won the transfer portal over the last couple of weeks. And I kind of came up with some criteria, and that criteria is a little bit different than 24/7 Sports or On3, where they kind of just blindly stack the quality and quantity of players and then spit out a transfer portal rankings. I look at two different things. One, the quality of players is extremely important. We see a lot of teams just go out in the transfer portal, grab as many players as they can, but the quality sometimes takes a hit. So you look at quality first, but then more importantly, in a conversation that I think gets lost a lot are the players that you bringing in, do they satisfy needs that your program have? And I think Auburn did a phenomenal job of that the last couple of weeks. Again, only 4 players coming in during this spring transfer portal window. You look at the quality of the players and say, a lot of good players getting added to this roster, but more importantly, they added players exactly to the spots where they needed it. We had this conversation 3 weeks ago with the Auburn fans, and we said, hey, what do we think position-wise Auburn needs to address in the transfer portal? And y'all said it best, right? Inside of the defensive line, potentially a veteran wide receiver. You look at what Auburn brought in. Hugh Freeze was almost listening to you guys in the comments section. Want to get into what Auburn has coming in, how it satisfies some needs, and then more importantly, look at what this Auburn team is going to be like in 2024. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, the Auburn Tiger fans. This has been a team that over the last 18 months, with Hugh Freeze taking over, it has been just an absolute blast to talk in the offseason. You talk about recruiting, you talk about transfer portal. I've been having a blast. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with, what did Auburn need heading into the spring transfer portal window? And we largely identified 2 different positions. One, the inside of that defensive line, where you said you have some decent players, right? Trill Carter, Gage Keys, but the depth on the inside of that defensive line, you had some question marks, right? Going into SEC play in 2024. And then the other position we kind of kicked around was the wide receiver spot, and specifically a veteran wide receiver. We think the talent in this Auburn pass catcher room is going to be very special in 2024. Not a ton of experience, right? And so what do they go out and do? Land Keandre Lambert-Smith, one of the more experienced wide receivers that you see in college football. But I want to start with what they did in the trenches first, right? And you look at Isaiah Rakes and Philip Bleedy, 2 things that really stand out. One, both guys that have played at the Power 5 level. Philip Bleedy had a phenomenal season at Indiana last year. They added some really good depth in the middle of that defensive line. And I think they added 2 guys, that really balance each other out exceptionally well. You look at Philip Bleedy, this is a penetrator. This is a guy that carries 300 pounds about as well as I've seen someone carry 300 pounds. He's a phenomenal athlete, can get penetration, can kind of create those negative plays. And then you bring in a guy like Isaiah Rakes, who is not going to be the stat sheet stuffer that some other defensive linemen are going to be. But if you look at this Auburn defense, you say he's a perfect fit for what Auburn wants in that nose tackle player who, again, not going to be a penetrator, not going to light up the stat sheet, but he's going to be a guy that allows everyone else to play at a super high level, right? When you have someone that at 6'1", 313 pounds, he's basically built like a fire hydrant, right? Low pads, big body. He's going to eat up double teams. He's going to win at the point of attack. And although he's not going to be the one making plays, he's going to keep those linebackers free, right? Offensive linemen not going to be working up to linebackers. These linebackers can cycle downhill and go make some plays. And I think that is the beauty of a guy like Isaiah Rakes, who, again, not going to be on the cover of any college football magazines, but I think has a massive impact on this Auburn defense. So you look at Bleedy, you look at Isaiah Rakes and say, we got better on the inside of that defensive line, but more importantly, we got deeper. And then you look at a guy in Kieran Crawford, who we haven't talked enough about, and I don't know if he's necessarily a day one starter for Auburn, but we talk about this all the time. On the defensive side of the football, what do you look for? You look for, in that front 7, can you stop the run and then get after the quarterback on 3rd down? A guy like Kieran Crawford brings a little bit of the best of both worlds. Heavy-handed edge guy that can win against the run, but more importantly, you bring him in to be a pass rusher. And we say this all the time. That is probably the number one thing at the college football level that I'm looking at for defenses heading into a season. Can you get after the quarterback? Kieran Crawford, 27 quarterback hurries, a 13% pass rush win rate last year. This is a guy that they bring in to help that Auburn pass rush, and you start looking at Falk and a guy like Jalen McLeod and maybe even Morris Williams as a true freshman and say that this pass rush could be pretty stinking good for the Auburn Tigers in 2024. So I think they got better there. And then you look at the wide receiver room, and again, we said we don't have question marks about the talent in the wide receiver room. I mean, Cam Coleman immediately is one of the most talented wide receivers in the country as a true freshman. What we did have question marks about was, all right, the experience, right? Do you want to go into a season in the SEC with, kind of true freshmen leading the way and a couple guys who were going into their second or third year? I think Hugh Freeze said no. And he goes on and get a guy in Keandre Lambert-Smith, who I think, one, has a really good shot at being the leading receiver for this Auburn Tigers program. And that's not a shot at Cam Coleman. That's more of me kind of hyping up a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith that, as a Michigan fan, I saw that Penn State offense. The good things that were happening in the passing attack were normally going to someone like Keandre Lambert-Smith, but that Penn State offense was absolutely brutal, pushing the ball down the field. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith has 1,000 yards written all over him, a guy that probably could have gone to the NFL draft had Penn State just not been a brutal passing attack. But more importantly, I think he fits like a glove in this Auburn wide receiver room where you have some big boundary wide receivers, but do you have that guy that can separate, can be that quarterback best friend? That's Keandre Lambert-Smith's game, right? He's an elite separator. He knows how to run routes. He can operate after the catch. Bring in an experienced wide receiver that you can move all around the offense and kind of be reliant and kind of be that quarterback's best friend, I think was probably the kind of wide receiver that Auburn was missing. So you kind of satisfy both bringing in a veteran wide receiver and kind of a skill set that I think Auburn wanted to address. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith, in my opinion, was by far the biggest addition for this Auburn program. Now, the other thing I want to look at here is Auburn and what they lost, because we talk a lot about, all right, how many guys did you bring in? And we are all thinking about these teams, right? We got a few in mind that bring in a ton of guys, but they also lose a ton of guys. And that's kind of how you play the transfer portal. What I look for is what are the teams that are getting better in the transfer portal, but aren't losing some really good guys. And not taking a shot at any of the guys that have chosen to transfer out of Auburn over the last couple of weeks, but there's not many guys on this list. Jay Fair was one of the guys that was tough to see go because I thought he was a solid player for Auburn. But outside of that, he kind of got squeezed out just because of the true freshman coming in and a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith. For him, it made sense to probably leave. You kind of scroll down this list and say, how many guys that Auburn lost were going to be contributors for that Auburn team in 2024? And I think the answer is not that many. And so when you're evaluating, all right, what teams got better, you can't just look at the number of players. You can't just look at the quality of players. You got to look at the quality of the players. Did they satisfy the position needs that they had? I look at Auburn and say, all right, we had two position needs that we had inside of the defensive line and a veteran wide receiver. We satisfied both. We didn't lose that much talent in the transfer portal. To me, it is clear that the Auburn Tigers have won the last couple of weeks in the transfer portal, and it sounds like Auburn might not be done. I want to just buzz by Javion Cole really quick. He's coming from San Jose State, a guy that is a hot commodity immediately in the transfer portal, and for good reason. You look at the numbers from last year, 53 targets, only 26 receptions, a 49% completion percentage when targeted, 3 interceptions, primarily played that wide corner spot, but a guy that I could certainly see with the body type and skill set moving to that nickel role. I think he brings you a really, really good cornerback that you can put at a lot of different spots on this Auburn defense. And that is maybe a question for Auburn in the secondary, although I feel pretty good about the names in that secondary. But we always say Hugh Freeze is going to look to get better at a lot of different positions, whether it's on the recruiting trail, whether it's in the transfer portal. I look at this Auburn team. We just did a breakout teams in 2024. I think Auburn got so much better at so many different spots. Now, you look at what went wrong for Auburn in 2023, and yes, it was obviously the quarterback play wasn't great. Hugh Freeze is taking over the play calling, or at least having a much heavier hand in terms of what this offense is going to look like. But more importantly, we said it when Peyton Thorne transferred to Auburn. If you can surround him with talent, he can be a quarterback that can win you games. The problem is, one, he came in after spring, which is really, really hard for quarterbacks to take over and command a room and command an offense. But more importantly, the pass catches on that Auburn team last year were just not good enough, not even close to being good enough. You look at this Auburn team going into 2024, Peyton Thorne has been there for a year. Hugh Freeze taking over the play calling duties, or at least having a heavier hand. We got way better in the offensive skill department. I think they got better in the spots they needed to get better at. I'm fired up for this team. And again, I'm not picking Auburn to win an SEC championship in 2024. That being said, this team is clearly going in the right direction. If Hugh Freeze continues to trend, this is going to be a team that's going to be competing for SEC titles in the near future. Fired up about this one. Wanted to hop on, talk about what Auburn has done in the portal. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.